Take a moment to settle your body in whatever position feels most comfortable, letting your shoulders ease down and your breath fall into a slow and natural rhythm as the day begins to fade from your thoughts and soften at the edges of your awareness, with no demands left to meet and nothing pressing for your attention. The night is simply here, quiet and unhurried, offering a calm backdrop where you can rest without expectation or effort. And each gentle inhale can loosen what may still feel tight or active inside you. Everything is steady tonight. In a little while, we will wander into the quiet glow of a cave beneath the ocean. But there is no rush to picture anything beyond the stillness that is beginning to form around you now. As you breathe, imagine the hush of distant water moving at an easy pace somewhere far off. Not loud or sharp, just the kind of sound that blends with the dark and grows softer the longer you listen. The space you are in is safe, private, and dim. It's a kind of setting where even small movements feel optional and the mind can drift without judgment. When you start to picture the gentle shimmer that sometimes rises in hidden places beneath the sea, you might think of it as a slow bloom of light that never pushes or startles, only lingering against stone and water the way moonlight touches a quiet floor. For now, allow your thoughts to drift at their own pace, with no need to follow any single thread too closely. As your body settles further into the quiet of this evening, you can begin to picture the shoreline as something gentle and familiar, a place where the world narrows to the hush of water and the muted shapes of rocks that have been smoothed by years of slow tides, with cool air brushing lightly across the skin and carrying the faint scent of salt. The ocean at night is not a rushing force here, but a broad cushion of movement that rises and falls with a rhythm almost as calm as the breath resting in your chest. And even the sound it makes seems softened by distance and darkness, as though it knows to keep its voice low. Far from the brighter surfaces of the coast, there are places where the land dips beneath the water in quiet folds, forming hollowed passages worn smooth over time. And in one of those hidden spaces, light and water come together in a way that feels unhurried and naturally soft. Everything is steady tonight. The glow that rests in that cave is not a sudden beam or flare, but something that lingers the way starlight does on a clear night, faint at first and then easier to notice as the eyes adjust, filling small pools and washed rock walls with a delicate blue tint that does not flicker or rush. You can imagine entering that hidden space not with a splash or a step, but with a slow drift of thought, letting yourself picture the edges of stone outlined in dim shimmer, the ceiling above low and curved, and the water itself continuing its gentle movement with no urgency at all. The color that appears is cool and quiet, more of a tint than a brightness, and it seems to rest on every surface as if laid there by time rather than by force, seeping into corners and flowing along subtle curves in the walls. In your mind, you might notice how the silence of that cave does not feel empty, but filled with a soft presence created by the gentle lap of water against stone and the mild echo that carries each sound a short distance before letting it fade. If you picture the floor of the cave, it might be smooth in some places and pebbled in others, each bit of texture softened by water. And where the shallow edges widen, there could be patches of darker rock touched by the glow just enough to reveal their shape. In this place, there is no need to move quickly or wonder what comes next, because every part of it seems to invite quiet observation rather than action, giving the mind permission to linger on small details like a curved surface, a ripple of light, or the low stretching shadows cast by gentle waves. This glow beneath the ocean is not loud or showy, and there is comfort in the way it simply exists without announcing itself, like a lantern placed far in the distance whose light is meant only to reassure rather than guide. As you continue to settle into the thought of that blue-lit space, the sense of stillness that surrounds it can become part of your own breathing and posture, easing the pace of your thoughts and letting the body feel heavier and more at ease. Everything is steady tonight, even if the picture in your mind shifts or blurs. The feeling that the cave offers, calm and closed, and touched by quiet light, remains steady and clear, giving you a place to rest your imagination without any need to hold it firmly. You can let the idea move in and out of focus like a reflection on gently moving water, always there and always peaceful in its slow, fluid quiet. At the heart of this gentle idea is the simple image of light resting in water, and how that light can linger without urgency or demand, moving at the same slow pace as the quiet tide that carries it into hidden places beneath the surface. And when you think of that movement, it can be helpful to picture an easy flow that asks nothing of you except to notice its calm presence without needing to follow it. In this steady imagining, the cave beneath the ocean is not a place that startles or surprises, but instead a softened, hollow shaped by time and touched by the hush of night. And the glow within it is not a sharp beam, but a mild breath of color that leans into curves of stone with the gentlest touch. Everything is steady tonight. When you consider the way the light settles along the walls, you might think of how moonlight sometimes reflects on a still pond, not with brightness that forces attention, but with a muted tone that invites stillness. And this underwater glow follows that same quiet pattern, stretching in pale blue across surfaces that have been worn smooth by years of distant tides and shifting sands. The many patterns of shadow that form in shallow corners look less like darkness and more like softened outlines, as if the glow itself has decided to leave small pockets untouched so the eyes can rest on the contrast, and nothing in that space rises above a whisper. If your thoughts drift to the sound within the cavern, it is shaped by water moving in small gestures, brushing against the stone with the hush of a cloth drawn slowly across a tabletop, and the echo that follows is faint, rounding each motion so it fades before growing distinct. In imagining a cycle of this glow and movement, you can picture the same idea expressed in different forms, like the way a distant lighthouse casts a wide, quiet halo rather than a piercing flash when seen from far away, or the way the reflection of stars on the surface of a lake can shimmer without ever feeling bright. Each return to the image can be as soft as a breath released in the dark, and each repetition adds a little more ease to the mind, allowing thoughts to stretch out slowly, finding space between the pauses where stillness grows. A second gentle cycle might focus on the air of the cave, cool from the nearness of water and carrying a faint mineral scent, something clean and uncomplicated that settles lightly in the awareness without pulling it in any direction. And the walls themselves might feel slightly damp to the touch, holding the coolness the way shaded stone holds the memory of night, even after sunrise. Everything is steady tonight. A third cycle can settle on the texture of the water, which does not rush or churn, but drifts in easy laps, with each small wave passing a soft shimmer along the curved edges of rock, and the glow follows that motion in delicate ribbons that fade as they travel, leaving behind a sense of unbroken calm. You can imagine standing at the shallow edge, not wading in, but simply letting your awareness rest near the place where stone meets water. And in that nearness, there is nothing to decipher or solve, only the slow contact of glow and surface. A fourth gentle return might touch on how the ceiling of the cavern arches above in a broad, low span, creating a sense of shelter that does not confine but welcomes. And when the water shifts, the light travels upward in faint strokes, tracing the curved patterns and making them visible in a way that feels both natural and subdued. The echo of the tide as it moves in and out of the opening is softened by the shape of the entrance. So what you hear in your mind is a muted breath of water coming and going with the rhythm of a long, even rest. A fifth reflection can return to the color itself, which is not a bright or startling blue, but more like the memory of twilight on a still evening, pale and translucent, resting on everything it touches without altering its shape. And the way it clings to the stone makes each contour visible without defining it sharply. Everything is steady tonight. A sixth pass might stay with the idea of staying still, picturing a person or even a quiet mind settling on a smooth ledge just above the waterline, where the stone is cool but not harsh, and the sound of the tide fills the space with a background murmur that blends with thought till both become part of the same soft current. In this place, time itself seems to slow and stretch, not by force, but by absence of pressure, leaving room for the mind to rest on whatever detail floats forward without needing to hold it. A seventh gentle cycle may follow the way light and water meet at the shallow entrance of the cave, where the ocean outside sends in faint ripples that catch the glow and carry it just a little farther each time, never rushing, and then letting it slip back toward the wider sea, as though the cave and the water share an understanding of quiet exchange. The thought of this can rest in your mind as you continue to breathe in an easy rhythm, each inhale and exhale as unhurried as the drift of a small wave brushing a cove. An eighth reflection might notice how the temperature inside the cave remains consistent, neither too cold nor too warm, held stable by the depth of the water and the thickness of the rock above. And the steady coolness gives the air a clarity that pairs with the hush of the space. Everything is steady tonight. A ninth slow cycle can bring attention to the way vision adjusts in such a gently lit place, where there is no need to focus sharply because the shapes and edges are all softened by the glow. And when the eyes no longer search for distinct outlines, the mind follows and relaxes into the same loose focus. In this softened view, the walls blur slightly into the pools they contain, and the flicker of the glow is less a point of light and more a slow, spreading presence that seems to come from within the water itself. A 10th return to the core idea can think of the cave as part of a quiet story written by the ocean over countless tides, with stone shaped by a patient hand and light gifted to the water by small, unseen sources, perhaps tiny living things or gentle minerals, and the result is a place without corners or sharp turns, where every surface encourages rest. Everything is steady tonight. An 11th pass might linger on the way sound travels in the cavern, not bouncing or echoing in sharp bursts, but slipping along the curved walls in muffled tones that fade almost before they register. And this quality allows silence to dominate without feeling empty. A 12th gentle loop could hold the image of the waterline rising slightly with the tide and then retreating again, the glow following each motion like a thin veil drawn across the stone. And the movement is so gradual that it feels less like change and more like breathing spread across long moments. A 13th reflection can consider how the entrance of the cave remains partly hidden beneath the water's surface, making it visible only to those who approach slowly and without intent to disturb. And that sense of protection adds to the calm, creating an impression that the cave chooses quietness by its very shape. Everything is steady tonight. A 14th cycle may dwell on the way the blue glow seems to rest on the water even when it moves, maintaining its hue without flicker, and as your thoughts take in that image, they can begin to adopt the same steadiness, drifting along a quiet path without needing to arrive anywhere. A 15th reminder of this quiet place can return to the idea that light in the darkness does not need to be strong to be comforting, and that a faint glow can be enough to shape the atmosphere of an entire space with gentleness and ease. Everything is steady tonight. To move more deeply into this quiet imagining, it can help to shift your attention gently from the first impressions of the cave to the subtler layers that rest beneath them, letting the scene grow broader and softer at the same time, as though every detail you have already pictured is now joined by quiet companions that settle into the background without asking to be noticed directly. And as these layers accumulate, your thoughts can drift along them like slow water following the curve of the shore, unhurried and steady in their pace. In this expanded view, the blue glow still rests against the stone and water, but now the presence of the surrounding ocean begins to feel even more supportive, like a vast cushion holding the cavern in place with a calm pressure that never wavers. And the movement of tides beyond the entry offers a slow exchange of water and sound that keeps the space cool. It's fresh and nearly silent. Everything is steady tonight. As the idea of the cave opens further, you might picture the stone in closer detail, not through sharp focus, but through a soft awareness of texture, where some surfaces are smoothed by time and others keep faint ridges that catch the glow in quiet lines. In between these surfaces, small pockets of shadow form gentle valleys where the light does not fade abruptly, but blends into muted tones that add depth to the silence. The air inside the cavern remains still, touched only by the slow breath of the tide at its opening, and because that movement is so gradual, the atmosphere holds a persistent calm that wraps itself around every thought that drifts into view. As you continue letting the scene unfold, you can consider how the glow itself might originate from tiny organisms or minerals in the water, resting in suspension and responding to motion with a soft persistence that illuminates without insisting on attention, and the particles holding that glow shift at a pace too slow to track, forming a haze of color that lingers near stone surfaces like mist. In this light, the curves of the cavern's walls appear almost fluid themselves, shaped not only by time, but by the memory of water that is pressed against them through countless quiet cycles. And the result is an environment where each surface leads gently into the next, with no sharp corners to jar the mind or eye. Everything is steady tonight. As more quiet layers form in your awareness, you might imagine how the underwater entrance to the cave changes slightly with the tide, revealing more of its opening during certain moments, and then letting the water climb higher in others, but never enough to disturb the calm within. And this rhythm creates a sense of breathing extended across hours rather than seconds. Even the temperature of the water carries part of the calm, holding a coolness that spreads through the cavern with the help of stone that has been shaped and smoothed by the same currents that now move with gentle restraint. And this coolness becomes part of the atmosphere, the way dusk light becomes part of a quiet room. The shape of the ceiling above remains modest, hanging low in some areas where the glow touches it in faint patterns that resemble soft strokes of watercolor, and rising just enough in others to provide a sense of height that keeps the space from feeling confined, balancing the feeling of shelter with the openness of the sea beyond. As your thoughts settle further, you might return to the interplay between silence and sound in the cavern, where the faint murmur of water brushing against stone feels less like noise and more like a slow heartbeat, steady and distant, guiding the rhythm of your own breathing without pressing upon it. Everything is steady tonight. In picturing these softer layers, it can help to think of how light behaves differently depending on the depth of the water it touches, with shallower pools near the rock ledges carrying a clearer glow that reveals traces of sand and small stones beneath, while deeper pockets hold a darker tone where the blue fades into a muted wash. And both variations exist in quiet agreement, each complementing the other without contrast or urgency. The water's edge along the walls might leave lines of moisture that catch the glow just enough to reflect a pale shimmer upward, tracing paths that mark where the tide has rested in earlier moments. And these lines add a subtle history to the space, a record of change that remains gentle and unintrusive. As your mind continues to drift through this place, you can imagine the 5 quiet elements that shape its atmosphere woven through the scene without separation. The stillness of the enclosed stone, the softness of the blue light, the hush of the slow tides, the coolness of the air, and the subtle echo that stretches each sound before letting it fade. Each of these elements supports the others in ways that do not call attention to themselves, but create a layered sense of restfulness that grows deeper the longer you stay with it. Everything is steady tonight. In another gentle pass, you might consider the way the glow reflects in the shallow water, not forming sharp images, but spreading in smooth gradients that move with the smallest ripple, and each ripple softens as it travels, leaving behind only the memory of movement rather than a noticeable change. When the water meets the stone at the lower edges of the cavern, it does so without splash or abrupt motion, gliding along the surface in a way that suggests it has followed this same path thousands of times, learning to adjust to every contour and resting place without hurry. The walls of the cave, shaped across ages, hold the quiet like a vessel, allowing the glow and the water to share their presence evenly, and the low sounds that do emerge feel softened by the distance they travel through the enclosed air. Everything is steady tonight. As the idea of depth increases, you can imagine how the outer ocean remains vast and broad beyond the entrance, but the cavern itself sits slightly apart, as though protected by its placement and shape, allowing only the calmest influences to enter and keeping the space free from the restless churn that might exist in open water. In this way, the cave becomes a resting point, not just for the tide, but for the imagination, providing a place where images do not need to sharpen or move quickly to hold their shape, and where thoughts can slow until they feel almost still. The gentle glow that threads through the water reaches the stone with a consistency that feels almost like breathing, expanding faintly and then settling again. And each time it recedes, it returns with the same calm assurance, never shifting in tone or intensity. Everything is steady tonight. The air around the upper ledges stays cool and lightly scented with the mineral traces of the stone. And because there is no heat or moisture building beyond what the tide brings, the atmosphere feels refreshed without being noticeable, like a faint breeze that never arrives but always feels nearby. As you let your mind rest in this place, the details begin to overlap one another until they form a single layer of calm presence, where light, water, stone, and sound blend into the same gentle field of awareness, and the need to separate them falls away. Thought itself begins to drift slower, as though it is following the path of a small current that loops quietly along the cavern floor and then rises toward the entrance before returning once more to the quiet interior. And nothing along that path asks for attention or response. Everything is steady tonight. As you settle into the final stretch of this gentle narration, let your thoughts ease into the same quiet rhythm that has been guiding each image, remembering how the cave beneath the ocean holds its glow without strain, and how the water continues its slow and constant movement along the contours of stone, allowing every surface to rest in cool stillness, while the hush of the larger sea remains a distant presence that never intrudes, only surrounds with calm assurance. And in this softened awareness, you can return to the sense of shelter the cavern offers, where the blue light rests with no intention other than to exist quietly against the water and rock, creating a scene that needs no change or story to remain soothing. And as your breathing drifts into an even slower pattern, it can match the unhurried lap of the tide that moves in and out of the entrance. Like a long exhale shared between the ocean and the hollow, it is shaped over time, and with each slow imagining, the sense of boundary between your thoughts and the gentle environment becomes less defined, as though the stillness of the cavern air and the softness of the glow mingle with the quiet inside your own mind until both feel like parts of the same calm place that asks for nothing and offers only rest. And in that shared quiet, you can revisit the smooth ledges where water gathers in, shallow pools, and the deeper pockets where the color folds itself into darker tones without ever losing its calm hue. And as the light drifts in those pools, it reflects the shape of the stone, not with perfect clarity, but with a softened outline that adds to the sense of distance from the busy world above, helping each thought grow quiet enough to rest without direction. And while you pictured these gentle movements, you might again sense how the quiet echo of the cavern shapes every sound that arises into something soft enough to fade before it ever reaches sharpness, rounding each ripple of water and each faint touch of motion into a breath-like murmur that eases the mind further toward stillness. And all the while, the awareness of the glow remains a soft reminder that light does not need strength to create calm. It only needs a place to rest and enough darkness around it to let its presence feel meaningful without demand. And if you now imagine returning to the entrance of this place from within, The broader ocean beyond remains muted and supportive, like a silent companion that holds the cave in a steady embrace without sending waves or noise into its interior, keeping the air within cool and the sound low and the glow undisturbed. And as that larger presence continues to rest beneath the night, you can feel your thoughts uncurl even further, making room for a softer kind of quiet that drapes itself over every remaining sensation with the same ease that the faint blue shimmer lies across the smoothest stone. And nothing in this final stretch asks you to remember or plan or move, only to rest along the gentle current of imagination that has carried you here. And if your awareness drifts in and out or pauses in places without staying long, that is part of the calm, because the space beneath the ocean does not require attention to remain peaceful. It is steady, whether you picture each detail clearly or simply sense the hush that surrounds it. And wherever your focus lands within that calm, whether on the movement of the tide, the curve of the stone, or the haze of the glow, each part supports the others in silence, allowing the mind to grow quiet enough to ease into the kind of rest that feels natural and unforced. Everything is steady tonight. As the night continues around you and the gentle imagining of the cavern stays close but unhurried, you can release the need to follow the scene and simply let the calm it carries settle deeper into your breathing. And if your thoughts begin to fade or soften into fragments, you can let them drift the way a faint shimmer moves along still water, present for a moment and then gone without effort or concern. Everything is steady tonight, and as you rest in this quiet place, with the glow beneath the water resting over smooth stone and the tide moving slowly in the dark, you are free to let the final traces of wakefulness fall away at their own pace, knowing there is nothing left to hold or complete, and the silence of the cavern can fold gently around any lingering thought until it softens into stillness. And when you are ready to let the last edges of awareness grow dim, you can do so knowing that the calm of this glowing hollow remains near, steady and undisturbed, offering a silent good night.